So today we are unpacking the realities of salary transparency in the workplace, why it makes people uncomfortable, and how it can impact relationships at work, and whether opening up about pay could actually help close the wage gaps and create fairer environments. And today we're joined by Karabo Manyama. She is a spokesperson at Latita Africa, tax and legal and advisory firm. Good afternoon, Karabo.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Look, many employees still feel uncomfortable about talking about, salaries and your pay, and we're driving that hesitation. What's driving that hesitation, despite it being legal to do so?
So in our experience with our firm, we've realized that people just generally don't want to talk about salaries, and that's purely because it's a personal subject, right? Whether it's legal or it's not legal, people just generally fear being judged. I mean, your colleague just said it now. You want to find out about how much I earn, So it already creates an atmosphere of being treated differently. For an example, if you earn more, and there's also your gross and your net and salaries, and some individuals in the workplace might disclose their gross or the net, but then what that initially does is you don't actually realize how much a person actually takes home in its entirety, and that creates disparities within the workplace, and it also creates a culture of I see you differently because I see how the organization perceives you differently based on the rand value, and that can be scary.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Look, from a workplace culture perspective, what happens when salary transparency is encouraged versus when it is discouraged?
So, at Latita, I've seen when it's encouraged, and it's encouraged in a healthy way, and it's encouraged in a transparent way, the conversations are easier to have. You understand the decisions that have been made in terms of the salary bands as opposed to the actual, individual amount that, an employee gets paid. And when it's not, like when it's coffee time conversations, that becomes a little unhealthy because there are no facts, behind the information that is shared from one employee to the next. And what we see it doing is that it starts creating issues around, distrust. And you don't want to create a culture where employees don't trust their employers, or employees are not trusting the next employee, and then also not being able to work together and we have synergy and be able to be productive within the work environment. So it's got to be healthy. The conversation, yes, must be transparent because yes, it is legal to share this information, but we've got to do it in a controlled manner.
Oh my gosh. Look, to be honest, I think it boils down to fair payment. Could open salary discussions actually help close the pay gaps, particularly around gender and race inequalities?
I would say yes, if it's done correctly, right? So, firstly, employees should start by comparing apples to apples. That's just where we start, right? And you can't really compare between if there's an apple to a pear type of situation, right? So when we talk similar titles, maybe different responsibilities, different qualifications, different experience or work experience also counts towards your skill level, performance records. When you start putting past salaries as well, and you weigh those up against what one gender earns versus the other gender. There's a lot. It's so layered, and there's a lot to be considered. There's also working hours, your location. Some people get to work from home. There's hybrid. work environments as well. What are the benefits, of the incentive structures that they have? What does each individual bring to the table? And when we go back to having those healthy conversations, we would actually be able to realize as organizations whether the gender disparity does exist or whether it doesn't exist, and how do we close those gaps.
But also, doesn't it boil down to, as you say, your qualifications, your experience also? I think it's the same thing in radio. It's about your experience, how long you've been on radio, your qualifications rather, as well. Doesn't it boil down to that? So that when I'm talking with my colleagues know for how many years I've been on radio, and I know how many years you've been on radio as well. So doesn't it boil down to that as well?
It would boil down to that. I'm in complete agreement with what you're saying, because...
Did I lose you? Did I lose Latita? Oh, Karabo rather. I'm looking at the company name. Karabo. Oh yes, I lost Karabo. But in a nutshell, I think we got the gist of the conversation. We can have the conversation, Kea.